No problem.
Appreciate you. Check, 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 check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's like in the yellow. Is that good?
I know.
All right, you guys gonna come on in here? Let's get going. Can't get started till we get everybody seated. Get the noise down in the other room. All right.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good? We're good? All right, so we're at the portion of the event here where you're going to get to start hearing some real crypto finance, charts, all that good stuff.
Alpha.
How to make some money, right? This is not financial advice.
Somebody's hitting the red button.
So this next gentleman that's coming up, member of the community, good friend of mine, has built his own projects on PulseChain, has supported the ecosystem the whole time he's been in. Also is brilliant when it comes to, he's mentored by somebody out in the traditional finance world who's a brilliant individual in that space. He was mentored by him. So he's really understands charts, values. In my opinion, charts are for historical look. You know, I look at charts as a historical view of what has happened in the past and what type of market conditions created the charts that we see in the past. Some of these guys are good enough to look at the tea leaves and say, hey, well, if this has happened in the past, this is what we see coming, this is what we're probably gonna get. I take all that with a grain of salt myself, but usually they're right, and I'm usually wrong, and my sentiment usually when I go and make a buy or a whatever is usually, anybody else end up on the bottom of the trade all the time? No. That's why I don't trade, because I always end up on the bottom of it, and I just don't want to do it anymore. I hate losing money. That's why when I go to Vegas, I've been to Vegas 20 times in the last 10 years, and I haven't.
Well, thank you, RG and SJ, for bringing me up for another fantastic presentation. Today we're going to start with macro and make a case for ETH as sound money and the backbone of DeFi. And then we'll roll into our favorite chain, PulseChain, and land on HEX. And you know, my hope here with this talk is to basically set the foundation for HEX as the next Bitcoin and maybe give us a possible solution for how to help store more value in HEX and actually alter the behavior and choices, as Gabriel so eloquently put earlier, that people are making, so that more and more HEX economic energy is getting locked out for the maximum amount of time. And you know, shout out to the Actuator protocol for also coming and building on HEX and giving us another avenue to build cool new tools, because that's what finance professionals want, is more leverage and more ability to hedge and take risk in a responsible way. And so I'm going to start with just, you know, the reason why we're all in crypto, and this is why it's the dollar's purchasing power over the past 100 years. It's not looking too good for the dollar, and every year that you're saving in dollars, you are struggling to keep up with, you know, the ability to pay for things. That's called inflation. You know, there's the taxation element, and this ultimately leads to currency debasement. So inflation is just more units being printed. The nice thing about HEX, for example, is that that economic energy that's being inflated is going to the user base, and that's a powerful concept for, you know, outpacing this issue right here. Even down 99% on HEX is still doing better than the dollar, and so I would argue throughout this presentation that it's a better form of money. So if you don't mind, I'll probably just sit and do like a nice quick little chart session. This is kind of a look into the back room of what goes on AXiSalive.com, where I talk about the macro environment. Here's another powerful visual image of, I don't know how many people have been to usdeckclock.org, but it doesn't look good. We're in a lot of debt as a nation, and so I think cryptocurrency is really just a powerful way
Hey, what's happening, bud?
to circumvent a lot of the pressures that's put on
Right
the
on,
consumer
right on.
base. That's
Yeah,
out of
no,
our control.
I broke free for a minute
because
here.
you know
I'm going
our
to
money is better and it does better
go back
for us,
up in
and it
about
works for
45
us, and we
minutes,
choose
so
the rules,
I got some time to
ultimately.
chat.
And to that note, isn't it cool that we're here at the bottom on a lot of these assets, and it's the ultimate opportunity to get in on something at the ground floor, on something that's technically sound, that is really just a copy of Ethereum with faster block times and cheaper fees. I think that's a powerful thing, and the fact that it's backed by billionaires and the guy that made an ERC20 to a 10,000x in 2.5 years is someone that I would want to put my votes on. So let me go through here a little bit and talk about the dollar. If you don't know how to read a chart, I hope that I do a good enough job of making a storyline that helps this make sense. And we're looking at years of data here. This dollar chart goes all the way back to 2009. I'm going to put it on a monthly. So back in 2008, bottom of the financial crisis was down here. The dollar had some sideways action for going into like January of 2014, and then it had a big move up. And ever since then, we've basically been making higher levels, and it wasn't until recently that we actually started to break down and out of this area. And that's significant because typically what you find is that when the dollar is going down, your risk assets like stocks, even, well, in the less risky assets like gold, they're going up and appreciating just because simply there's more units of dollars floating around that's putting, if there's infinitely more of the things in my left hand and there's the same amount or less things, or that they're increasing at a slower rate than they're rapidly increasing dollars, it's just an imbalance in supply and demand. And that's what these next few charts are going to try to explain. So like a lot of the reasons why we know that the next couple of years is going to be really good for assets is because the amount of units of dollars is going to increase, and that's shown in the global liquidity chart, which I have here. And anybody with any basic pattern recognition is going to see that there's this overhanging resistance period here back in 2018 and 2019, and when you break through that level, this is the total dollars globally, or a representation of some form of data of that. Once that breaks out, it basically puts you in a position where, in order to make sure the economy doesn't fall out, world governments have to print more money to counteract, and this is what makes asset prices rise. And so I'm not forecasting this as an actuality, but just as a possible potential of how much liquidity we may or may not see on the back of lowered interest rates and the M2 and M1 money supplies increasing. And this will put pressure on the dollar, which will make it fall. And that's going to make your stock prices, and you're already seeing that reflected in gold, rise at a really fast clip.
Herbs about.
And so this year's data is the gold price, and this is like something that the good old Larry Fink said, it's a flight to quality. Crypto is a flight to quality. Well, gold was the first flight to quality. It's been around for thousands of years, and it's been a store of value for mankind for as long as I've been alive. And yeah, back here in November of 2022, without going in too granularly and zooming in on that data there, that was the point where gold put a triple bottom in, and world governments started abandoning U.S. sovereign debt and moving rapidly into accumulating
About jurisdiction on whether or not they can try this.
Gold is just a bit ahead of where Bitcoin is at today. It's I would say Bitcoin is in this validation period here and just starting to break out.
No.
Let's see.
Chain exists. Answer my question.
Stocks. Let's go with. So this is an index of indexes. This is what the stock market has done over the past like 15 years. It's pretty much just up and to the right. And I could basically make a case here that Bitcoin as the Trojan horse,
Everything.
being adopted.
Richard
and
Hart
being a
said,
key component
this is not,
of, large players.
it's gone.
Portfolios.
You're sacrificing
It's
for
going
freedom.
to become an increasingly bigger percentage, and so
And
it's going to
that
look
the money
like
is
this eventually, where it's just going to climb and climb forever. It's just not going to increase at the same.
Some PulseChain coins that are worth.
First, decade of existence, which is why people like us are looking for the opportunities in smaller cap coins and with strong technology. For example, Bitcoin works as a Trojan horse, and it's like what I call the liquidity mule, because it's where all the dumb money and smart money piles into first. It always starts with Bitcoin and then rotates out of Bitcoin, goes into Ethereum, then into alts, then into complete butt coins, and then back into Bitcoin at the end of the cycle. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we are going to move away from the 4-year cycle, because Bitcoin mining has less and less of a impact by the halving event every few years. And so I don't want to go too technical on this stuff, but it's definitely setting up for a nice situation where ETH has now become contrarian, and that means that pretty much everyone and their brother on social media is shit talking
It sounded
the
like
founder of
he was
Ethereum,
saying,
and they're ignoring the roadmap and all the changes to come and improvements. And it's really simple, like when you look at the ETH BTC ratio, how low, how obvious it is, how easy it is to talk crap about the Ethereum price performance. But that's not indicative of the technical marvel. For example, it takes 10 minutes to settle a Bitcoin block, but an Ethereum block can settle in 13 seconds. And that's a big deal, because it's one step closer to mass adoption and actual real use case. So obviously, we're here because we believe that PulseChain is just a better, faster version of that. So ETH BTC ratio here, like this is why people are calling for the death of ETH, is because it's just been going down against BTC for some time. And this is normal. If I had another hand here, I could quickly draw out another line, but you can see this relationship where the price explodes out and it comes back down underneath this white line that I have, a horizontal. That same thing occurred last cycle here, and that same thing occurred in the previous cycle here. So this is right on track for normal Ethereum Bitcoin price behavior. And so capturing any ETH supply here or leverage on ETH, which would be us, PulseChain, HEX, before this back above this white line and starts to explode to the upside this is the best time to be getting in, because you don't have to wait the 3 years of downside to capture a really good opportunity for some quick gains. So it's sound money. They moved off of proof of work with ETH, and that means that ETH is bleeding 5 million ETH.
You can tell that HEX looks like it's.
So hopefully that makes sense, but that just means that less negative externalities on the Ethereum price, which means once this ratio flips, there's going to be less newly minted. Oh, sweet. Thanks. Check, check. Cool. Thanks. And so, where was I at? Oh yeah. There's less negative externalities on the ETH price, which means that Pulse can leverage the gains of ETH even more. So like the war chest of the sacrifice wallets, we hear a lot about that. And some people would argue that we're just waiting for ETH to perform before we see the moves on PulseChain, before we start to see a bigger rotation into PulseChain assets. And obviously anything good that happens to Pulse is going to be amplified in all the other connected pairs. And I'm going to show you a pretty cool tool toward the end that my friend Crispy Man from HEX Mayer made that actually shows the relative relationship of these liquidity webs. So I don't think it's ever been seen before. So coming off this case, guys, PulseChain's not looking that bad on the 7-day. I was expecting a nothing burger because I just feel like the bleeding is
make precedent so with. She threw out.
End of the rope.
She said, "No, this is not the same as Plex Core.
I don't want to go through the specifics, but
same as
has broken out of this falling.
EOS. This is not the same." So she
broke out, came back
telling them
the 4043 level and it's bouncing here.
We're no good. Not one of them, bro.
Much
Not
to
one of them.
RG's dismay, there
And
is
then
actually
one-
actionable content that you can get out of a chart because of things as simply as higher lows and higher
What's
highs,
that?
divergences, and you know, you go deeper on the inflation metrics and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That helps too. But I mean, it really can be boiled down to support.
Even
and
worse to-
resistance. So we're just flipping. This is support now. And
Like she is. And here's the other thing that really like something that on a personal
I wish
level,
I had more time
showed
to go into this stuff, but
Judge was like,
But if you want more information like that, feel free to hit me up on Telegram or on Twitter.
she was like,
HEX had a pretty
Fucking-
cool 5x move here over the last month and a half, and it ran into the same resistance. And I'm just going to do like a 3-minute TA session. If you break a chart down, you start zoomed out really far, and you just look at very basic support and resistance levels. We have 4 major ones here. And
She's like,
this level was
really?
going to be resistance going back.
and
to
like
last
she like
year
almost like
and
looked at the
December.
SEC like, you guys got a weak ass case. This guy did what he said he was going to do. He spent his own money, and he
Once
gave
you
26
clear that
to
level,
charity.
then the next level is like 2 cents per
You know what I
PX.
mean?
If you fail, you go back down to buy 0.008. So it's really a binary decision. You're either buying at 0.8 of a cent, or you're making decisions on
His-
which
his
you want to do it around 1.9 cents or 2 cents. It's really that simple, guys.
She disclaimer like I can't remember the wording on it, what it was.
Next up,
Some kind of Mr.
I
Hart's
think I want to make a case for
personality
HEX
and
leading out of macro and just
his
thinking
purchases
about
have absolutely nothing to
what
do with
HEX
this case.
means and what it could become. It's a
And
solution
that's
to the
kind of-
inflation problem. It's the first ever
She worded it.
that has a
And
future market supply baked into the blockchain, so you can actually see who's getting what and when they're getting it, which makes charting it a lot easier because you can see if some guy's getting a bunch of new HEX coins coming off on a stake in advance, and that's important because I don't think you can tell when the Fed's going to print or not going to print until they've made the decision to either cut rates or make some sort of fiscal decision, right? That's all up to the centralized planner, whereas in HEX it's up to the users who commit their HEX for some period of time to determine who gets the HEX next. And so that's pretty cool because it gives power back in the hands of the players. And not only is it doing that, but it's monetizing the time value of money. It's something that Richard talks a lot about. And that's important because one of the most important and most valuable things that we have as human beings is our time. And so if you're willing to commit to something for any period of time, especially longer time frames, that is the ultimate sacrifice. You know, above and beyond all else, we had to wait 2 years for PulseChain, but the ultimate sacrifice is waiting 15 years to get all the inflation and all the choices that comes along the way with that kind of a decision. So, I mean, HEX was the first mover, was the certificate of deposit on the blockchain. I believe that it's in a league of its own still to this day. And I'm going to make a case for why we should be building more on top of HEX, for HEX, in advance of HEX being understood globally as like as big of a innovation and as a solution as it is. So let's see, what do I want to bring up next? Well, we could go into cycle data and stuff, but I'm already probably halfway through. I got 20 minutes in. Crispy's made some pretty cool data sets that can basically, within a narrow band, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, predict the top of the cycle. One of these is called the golden mean ratio. I mean, he's replicated data and ways of visualizing data for us that you could do for other assets, but now you can do it inside of the PulseChain ecosystem with all of these assets. So this is available for you guys if you want to go check out hexfire.io. And it's very comprehensive, and he's always building on it. But when you combine the two data sets, and you can see here that you could have sold this red dashed line, so the blue line. So the blue line is basically the price's distance away from the turquoise line normalized on a scale. And when you touch this red line, that's a sell signal, period. Since the top in 2021, if you sold the red line, you were good, like in all of these cases. So we just touched it recently. Is that a surprise that it sold off? No, not for us, because we're just looking at the facts and the data and the charts, and it's a very simple decision to make.
These tools are incredibly powerful, especially when you approach them with a non-emotional bias and you just literally just read the data in front of you. Anytime you came below the green line was a buying opportunity. So this is just on HEX, but this extends itself to all of the assets on PulseChain. This one here is the golden ratio multiple chart. Looking back at the last cycle, so for example, reading the scales on the left from bottom to top, the higher you go up on this to the 1.0 level in the red dashed line here, that marks a top for the price. And this was in August of 2020 when HEX went up to like around a penny, penny and a half. Around big payday was a few months later, I think. It was either August or September, somewhere in there. And then the actual top blew this completely out the upside. Whereas on a Bitcoin golden ratio multiple or an Ethereum one, it literally touches just like this, the red line to a T, and it marks the top. And you can see PHEX is way down here at 40% right now. So it's got a lot of room to run. And if I was to draw lines on here, which I can't right now, but if I was to, you can see there's a pennant structure coming in here where these lows can be connected and these highs can be connected, and it creates a triangular structure, which means price is compressing down into an area of action, and then that's usually where a bigger move takes place. This is an advanced correlations matrix that basically you can, we'll use HEX because it's an important piece of this. Let's see, PHEX. Can't find it on here. We can do the combined express.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Well, so the way you read this chart is, for example, right now it's loading in, but on the Pulse one, okay, here we go, combined HEX. So is it to anyone's surprise that the Hedron, or the HEX perpetuals like Defi, Maxi, Hedron, the derivatives like Hedron, they're the most correlated to HEX, right? Obviously, because they're going to track the underlying collateral, which is HEX collateral. But interestingly enough, UFO is right up there with an 88 rating. So 1 is the max, -1 is the max in the other direction. 0 would mean that they're not moving in price relative to each other at whatsoever. So like a really positive correlation means these two assets are doing the same exact thing. Really negative correlation means that these two assets are going in opposite directions always. A 0 would mean there's no real relationship between two assets. And so this is really good for, you know, if you think that, look, if you're looking for an opportunity to, if you think or you don't think that like the perpetuals have value or not, well, this proves that as long as HEX is going to move, the perpetuals are going to move too, right? Because they're hitting like a 90 or above positive correlation. And so I was going to say that this UFO one's interesting, and it can give us detail. Why would the UFO token be so correlated to HEX? And I know this because it's got a massive liquidity pool with HEX. So then if the liquidity pools are big enough and they're directly connected, they will move up and down together. Even if there's no buys or sells coming through one of the assets, they'll just get dragged around together. And this is part of my level of expertise in this field, is being able to connect liquidity pools in creative ways to make charts do stuff that everyone's like, well, how did you make that happen? Which gets into my next point about the Communis token. And so I've been working with the dev who created Communis. For those that don't know, Communis is a tokenized T-share. Well, what does that mean? A tokenized T-share is when you go stake, you have the possibility of claiming this token, which would appear to have inherently no value, but except for that, it only inflates at the rate of what the T-share rate is allowing you to give. So as the T-share rate climbs in HEX, the amount of Communis that can be minted from a stake becomes less and less over time, so it's disinflationary, which means that there is a limit to a possible calm inflation into the future. And that's important because it means that there's no like hyper inflating quality to it at all, unlike HEX, which when you go to any amount of time, when you get it back, you're getting a principal pack plus all of your yield, which can be precarious because if you don't have all the fresh inflation in the same way as with the dollar, you're falling behind. So there needs to be a countermeasure, and the countermeasure is calm. It works in two phases, but simply put, a 1-year hex stake gets you 50 times less COM than a max length hex stake, and most of the guys that are getting the most COM are staking for 15 years. Well, why do you guys care? Well, it's simple. It's like, how much do we need to pay you guys to stake for 15 years? Will, if I give you 100% of your value back for staking for 15 years, is that enough value to get you to go stake for 15 years or not? 100%. Like, you want to bring me 100 grand and stake it for 15 years for yourself and store value in the chain? Well, you might be able to get $100,000 back of COM, but we were relying on the free market to figure out where is the maximum market efficiency, meaning the least amount of liability. So if we gave Will 100 grand, what's going to stop him from arbitraging that, taking his 100 grand, pumping that back into HEX, which pushes the HEX price up, which lowers the instant rebate, which means he got less back the next time. And that can work in a circular form on its own inside of a vacuum for only so long. But if the free market as a whole starts to like value COM, you may see a situation where, you know, maybe 20%, maybe 15%, maybe 35% is enough to pay people to get adoption increasing infinitely forever, because you're paying people some percentage back of the value of that commitment. And so this is really a commitments-based system, and I don't want this to go under the radar anymore. I think it's really important for people to really gravitate towards systems that's going to lock more value up, but give more value back, and scratch that itch of instant gratification meets delayed gratification. You have to hit both sides, because within all systems, all financial systems, there's this dichotomy of inflation or deflation. Well, deflation doesn't work either, because in the days of the dynasties and the monarchies, the kings had all the gold and everyone else was a serf. So that doesn't work. But if you hyperinflate forever, everyone gets poorer, so that doesn't work. So you need to have this two-token system or a fusion system where there's a balancing act of credit and debt cycles that self-correct based on the actions of the free market. And that's what the HEX-COM fusion is trying to solve for. It's trying to figure out, well, how can the market decide what's the right place to price COM to get people to stake the most HEX for the maximum amount of time possible? Any questions so far?
Which banana zone?
When banana zone? For what tokens?
For X.
Well, 5X is a pretty sweet start. I think that you're going to see some action next year. I don't know if you guys have heard my theory on 2026, but I think that we're gravitating away from the 4-year cycle, and I think that all of crypto is going to, that this time indeed could be different, and that we're just going to see the same type of move when gold got its ETFs back in like 2003. We're going to see Bitcoin just grind up and to the right. And I'll try to show you a chart that might make sense. Look, so I got 2 yellow lines here. I know it's messy. Apologize for that. But the top yellow line, that's Bitcoin in 2017, overlaid on the current Bitcoin price. So, I mean, you're talking about $500,000 price targets for Bitcoin if it was to play out in exactly the same way. But you can see that the price is.
So at this point, guys, the stream cuts out, and this is where I go on to basically make a case for a potential for these new unprecedented levels of buying of Bitcoin to create a situation where the upside's not as good anymore, the downside's not as good anymore, the cycle, in quotes, just goes on forever, and Bitcoin looks a lot like the stock market and grows at an annual rate of 20% per year for 5 years, and then drops to 15% for 5 years, and then drops to 10%, and so on and so forth. And in each subsequent bear market, the drawdowns are less because it's being more realized as a real full-scale adopted asset globally. And if this were the case, different altcoin sectors would start to decouple away, and the rotations would be kind of more cascaded across time. And because the liquidity mule Bitcoin would get so massive, there would just be certain sectors would go, and then that money would rotate back in, and then another sector would go. So maybe it's memes, then Ethereum and L2s, and then all the L1 forks of Ethereum would go, and then their subsequent ecosystems below them, and it would just be like kind of like a top-down effect where it would start at Bitcoin, and there would always be rotations happening, and there wouldn't be these just whole because there's so many more liquidity connections across all these global assets now tied into Bitcoin that you wouldn't just see these big, massive, hyperbolic run-ups like you did in 2017 anymore. And you can start to see that already playing out. So if that were to occur, you know, HEX and Pulse is going to get its move later in the cycle after Bitcoin just continues to grind up into the right, and then ETH finally gets a move where it really takes a lot of its market share back from Bitcoin. So timing, that's a little bit challenging, but that's when you'd see HEX and Pulse really get their biggest moves. You know, certain price targets you could say like, oh, if ETH hits 8K, yeah, I would expect you're going to see some kind of rotation into PulseChain, and then every doubling after that, you're going to see more of a rotation.
eHEX to do a similar type of move, because if the ratio of PHEX to eHEX gets wide enough, only a small percentage of the gains of the PHEX guys has to rotate into eHEX to really send that price chart with its illiquid situation. So it's definitely riskier, and there's a timing component to the eHEX, whereas PHEX is more stable and it's here to stay, and it's the official HEX. So two different trade opportunities. I would say eHEX is more risky at this point, but I wouldn't sell it down here necessarily. And the BankX FUD thing, yeah, that's that's a non-issue effectively. It's like a $4 million bag at this point, and they're getting out every day. So, Gabriel?
Let's do a hypothetical. What if the OA took that Ethereum and just only bought eHEX? What would happen?
Well, I think in a perfect world, people would rotate that money out of eHEX and into PulseChain, right? Because the alternative is pretty bleak for PulseChain. So it's very unlikely that that would occur. I don't foresee a situation where eHEX gets pumped first, because the whole point of PulseChain was to solve to make a better chain, and that's what it did. I actually like PulseChain more than Ethereum, which is probably blasphemy for a lot of people, but disclaimer, I do have bags, and I love the chain, I love how fast it is, and here's the thing of the reason why he wouldn't do that, because the metagame on PulseChain is completely different than the metagame of Ethereum. It costed me $900 to open a liquidity pool on Ethereum in November of last year. On PulseChain, you can open a liquidity pool for pennies, less than pennies in some cases. So the metagame is different because people's ability to actually interact with the chain and do useful things is so much less friction. So it changes people's decisions, it changes money flows, and anyone who knows about current of energy or how rivers flow, money is water, is electricity, it's just energy that's moving from one place to another place. But what I'm saying is the money on PulseChain can scatter out with much more surface area, much faster, without having all that friction and preventing people from making decisions to interact with the chain. So the metagame is different. And what I mean is for example, I've seen guys set up hundreds of liquidity pools, thousands of liquidity pools, V3 positions, in and out, in and out. You can't do that on Ethereum unless you are grandfathered into the chain and you have bags that are up crazy amounts, which is why the ultimate gift is that we can onboard people into a chain that's super cheap and usable. And it is a new and exciting game to play. And I just wish there was an easy button where I could teach all you guys everything I know, because it would make the chain so much more fun and robust, and everyone would be actively moving money around on there every day and finding more opportunities, and in that discovery process they'd be creating more opportunities for everybody to make more money. And that's why I become more of a developer or builder now, is because I just see such a bright future and opportunity here to build stuff at the base layer that guys that come over here from Ethereum in 2-3 years, they're gonna have to play catch up. And we just got it all here done now, and it's you're gonna be up mad, and all your community is gonna be saved and happy and rich, and it's just gonna be such a better experience. And even when it's up 100x or 1000x, it's still cheap relative to the US dollar. And that's what's important to the common man, is the relative price. And the irony there is that I made a token that's $20,000 a token right now, so it's like completely the opposite type of a game, but the PulseChain foundation is what's important, and having that ratio, that favorable ratio for guys to come in and when it's 50x up or 1000x up and still can get millions of units for pretty much, pretty low cost, even at such high multipliers. That's what's going to create a beautiful redistribution event over and over and over, and you're going to see that credit and debt cycle play out. Boom bust cycles play out on PulseChain at a faster rate than they ever could have on these other chains. So I feel like it's going to start to try, at least at a minimum, to decouple away from the typical crypto cycle.
So what about if you have a constant purchase of HEX on Ethereum? Now, not all of it at once, because it'd be wasted. But let's say that it's a constant, and that pattern creates this equal. You're talking about these two different games going on ETH and Pulse, and so by having this constant buy pressure on that eHEX, how does the liquidity pairing and all that connect to PulseChain? You're not putting all of it in there. You're just doing it on a regular basis that people rely on it and know what's going on, and so it creates this balance between the two. And then with that balance between the two, you create this instant bridge through liquidity. They're doing this with Uniswap, they're doing it with OmniBridge. So if all of a sudden HEX becomes kind of this instant bridge because you're balancing out the two sides.
Yeah, that's happening right now. So all of eHEX's liquidity is paired with pHEX on the PulseChain, most of it anyway. And so it's happening.
So having a constant buy from that Ethereum into on the eHEX.
Yeah. I would rather him bridge it in and buy directly on the PulseChain. Put a constant buy on all of them. And who's to say that that's not already happening? So yeah, you got to pick the asset strategically, and I just don't. So I think eHEX is a different kind of play now. It's not that it won't perform. Yeah, I'm actually saying that it probably will do pretty crazy numbers. You just, timing, it's going to be hard. But you think you brought up a good point, which is like, well, why don't we all just start building stuff like that on HEX? Like, why have to make all these other things or side projects and stuff? And that kind of leads nicely into the AXiS and ALiVE fusion, which is something that I've been working on since April, which is going to be directly bonded to COM. And the reason why is because I can't take my $2 million liquidity pool and influence the HEX price with $35 million in it. Like that HEX liquidity web is outweighing my coin like 16 to 1. And so I can't move the HEX price with my little coin. But what I can do is I can move the COM price by bonding this new system that's going to be a proof of concept for COM and HEX, so that it incentivizes you guys to stake more HEX for the long term and get instant rewards, like instant payouts. And it's up to the free market, because that's how it's designed, to decide, well, what is the right amount of money to get the most of you guys to go buy and stake HEX, right? That's ultimately the goal, is you just want to get more people to buy HEX and lock it up for the long term and store value in it. So we can hit escape velocity and change the adoption curve from this to this in a shorter period of time. Let's see, what was I going to bring up?
What about the possibility of having, sorry for asking so many questions.
Oh, you're good.
What about the possibility of creating this instant bridge? And so you're doing your trading on PulseChain, but it's actually changing things on the Ethereum side, so you're not paying the Ethereum gas. Through that, what I was talking about, having that new...
That tech exists where you can, insta swap, right?
So wouldn't Richard be interested in doing that kind of a thing to make HEX into a liquidity bridge for structure?
Well, what's the difference if they bridge it in and bond it on the Pulse side where the fees are cheaper?
Because we have to have a traditional traditional Ethereum connection. So
That's where I disagree. I think we're going to move away from that, and we're going to decouple from that, which is, the amount of time is probably what we could debate. But ultimately, yeah, right now we're reliant on Ethereum for pricing, right? And that's what you're saying is to accelerate adoption from Ethereum guys to make sure that the eHEX has a use case still, right?
No, well, there's a couple things, but basically balance, structure, so that Ethereum actually needs it. It helps out take off the pressure, just like he told us, this multi-lane highway, it's an expansion. So that kind of structure is an expansion of Ethereum capability, which means once you create a structure and people rely on it, then they use it. And if you're not being used, then problems happen. And if we're tied with liquidity, then that affects PulseChain.
Well, so this is basically getting into an issue that's a lot bigger than just Richard. And the way that the Ethereum guys are solving for that is with L2s. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of L2s are being created every day. And then on the roadmap, I'm not an expert or that technical, but they got plenty of stuff in the works already that, Richard's hands are out of it. He's got his own chain now. eHEX will be successful because it's bonded on the PulseChain side. It's not Richard's responsibility to make his chain do well and save Ethereum at the same time directly.
Not save it, expand it. Expand it.
Well, that's what he did when he created PulseChain.
The government is relied upon ETH. Traditional finance is dependent on ETH. The more dependent they are on ETH, the more we are in expansion avenue. That's what the value is.
The value is in PulseChain being cheaper, faster, more liquid.
An expansion, a continuation of using.
That's what a bridge is.
They move over.
Well, they will, and they'll chase the price because that's what people like. Green candles are the best form of marketing.
Right, but Ethereum's not going to go away. It's so integrated.
We don't want Ethereum to go away.
Right.
But I just think that PulseChain will get more and more of the market share over time because there's more opportunity there. And that's even in a scenario where ETH can go to 30 or 60,000 in the middle term.
I think also it used to be a lot easier because I love to onboard. And for me to onboard back in the day just through Uniswap on HEX, a lot easier, especially for me. Now, I got friends just, hey Arthur, just do it. You know what you're doing, bridge it over. So it is that initial extra step.
So it was at this point that we got into the conversation of getting a listing on a large platform such as like a hit BTC or like a Coinbase or Binance or OKX. And remember, we were listed on a top 10 exchange, OKX, and then got removed after the regulation kind of smackdown occurred. So in the once this lawsuit's behind us, I really do expect crypto to really start opening up both hands wide and accepting PulseChain on a lot of the centralized platforms, which is going to create a whole new opportunity for money to flow into the chain and an ease in onboarding. So after that, followed up with this concept of, we can also solve this at the application layer and create much better on-ramping experiences, and that anyone can start an entrepreneurial endeavor and get the ball rolling. So for example, I'll give this idea for free. Anybody that wants to take this and run with it, whether it's going to be us or somebody else, that's going to be better for the chain. But essentially, if we were to just simply create an application where there's basically, you download the app, you connect your bank account, and then there's literally two buttons on the app. One of the buttons says invest. And if you click the invest button, it just buys into a basket of Richard Hart coins. And when you click divest, it just sells them off and puts it right back into your bank account so that there's a direct flow from your checking into the ecosystem. Maybe there's like a 3-day holdover, and then you can divest and pull it all back in one button press. So literally all you could do with this application would be you download the app, you add your banking information, you click invest, which gets you into an index of the Richard Hart coins. And then after a holdover period, you can sell it off in one button press, divest, and it goes back. So there's really only four steps in that process. Download app, add banking information, invest, divest. And then it's not up to the user to think about anything. They don't have to think at all. They're just, this is your like one button press exposure into the Richard Heart ecosystem. The other button that could be on there would be an earn button. So like if you click earn, it'll just, the app will just take money. You type in the amount of money you want to spend. It'll go straight from your checking account. The application will look at the farms and PulseX, and it'll pick maybe one or two of the highest paying farms, and it'll put you in those farms, and you'll start earning that. And when you click exit farms, it'll pull out all your yield, all your coins, sell them off, and put the money back in your bank account. So there's really no flexibility at all. It's just it's a very railed on ramp, and then because it's so simple to use, more people would use it, and they wouldn't even know what they're buying or selling. The app would take care of that for them. So it was at this point in the slide presentation that I went back and focused on what kind of ways the AXiS ALiVE fusion can actually affect HEX staking behavior. And I went into this liquidity web discussion and explanation on how this works. Effectively, what you have here is PHEX with a $31 million liquidity pool, and AXiS over here with a little $1.2 million liquidity pool. And then COM is over here with a very small $150,000 liquidity pool. And I make the case that the only way that I can affect HEX positively over the long run using the liquidity bonding in my little coin is by making AXiS ALiVE, the two token system, emulate the HEX COM fusion. All right. And so when ALiVE launches, there'll be a secondary token, and the mintability of ALiVE is directly proportional to the amount of AXiS being locked and burned. Very similarly to how the only way you get COM is from, long-term HEX stakes. So they have similar properties and qualities, which is why the AXiS ALiVE fusion will be a proof of concept. Now, if I take the AXiS ALiVE fusion we do believe that the HEX COM fusion is a working system that will make HEX more valuable, then AXiS ALiVE should be able to do it at an accelerated pace because it's the same mechanics on a much tighter control on supply, where we can play out that kind of 10 to 15 year relationship over just maybe 1 to 2 years. So it's similar mechanics, but then not in addition to that, there will be a strong, ALiVE to COM bond, which should allow the AXiS ALiVE system with, $1.5-2 million liquidity pool web, be able to pull around this little $100,000 to $200,000 asset PCOM, so that if ALiVE and AXiS are increasing in price, COM will also increase in price, which will give long-term HEX stakers more value to be able to pull off more value from their long-term HEX stakes. And this is essentially where I left it. And shout out to Crispy Man from hexfire.io for providing us these awesome tools where we can see liquidity webs and how tokens connect to each other through their connected bonds. This is a super powerful tool. Go check him out on hexfire.io. And, enjoy the video, guys. This is the launch of Markable's new video. I showed it live for the first time here in New York, and now you get to see it in a high quality. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.